Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in again, and let's jump straight into the coding now. First off, we want something to happen whenever our player game object hits or collides with the point game object. We have already a script that handles the player collisions, and of course it's called player collision, so let's go ahead and open it up in Visual Studio by double clicking it. Once it's open, we can see that we already checked whether the player collided with obstacles, and then whether it collided with the color changer. And we also left a comment at the bottom to indicate where we should write the code in case the player collided with a point game object. So you can see how useful these comments can be. So we will handle it just like before with an else if statement. Else if collision dot tag equals to point. And if that's the case, first off we want to add +1 to our score, but we didn't create a score text yet, so we will also write a comment here to indicate where we should write the code later when we do. Once we add the +1 to score, we want to destroy the star object. And inside of the brackets we type in which game object we want to destroy. It's going to be collision dot game object. So we'll still need to write this code later on, but let's go ahead and save this and see if the object will get destroyed, so we can be sure everything works as we want it to. Okay, seems fine, but there aren't any more of these stars spawning inside of the obstacles. The spawning of the obstacles is handled in the obstacle cloner script. Whenever we spawn an obstacle, we also want to spawn this star or point game object. Open up the obstacle cloner script, and once it's open we will need to add a new variable. That's going to be the variable that will hold the prefab of the point game object. So it's going to be public game object. Let's name it point prefab. We want to spawn the point at the exact same location where we spawn the obstacles, so we won't need a specific location for the point game object as we did in these. Therefore, this variable will be enough. So if we are spawning a small circle, we also want to spawn a point inside of it. To do that, in this part of the code, add another instantiate function. And this time we will be spawning the point prefab. However, the location and the rotation is going to be the same as for the circle. So we can just go ahead and copy this. Paste it here. And don't forget to close it up with a semicolon. Let's do the same thing in the rectangle piece of code. Instantiate point prefab, and this time the position and rotation will be the same as for the rectangle. So this time we'll be copying this and pasting it here. Again, don't forget the semicolon. And this code should actually be enough to handle the point game object. So go ahead and save all of this. And don't forget you go to the house screen and find the obstacle cloner script, since we need to attach the point prefab here. Find the point prefab in the prefabs folder and drag it into place here. Once that is done, let's click on play and see how it works. Okay, so now the point is in the middle, but what will happen when we get to spawn another one? It doesn't spawn in the right place, it spawns below the actual obstacle, and we don't want that to happen. The reason behind that is that we made a mistake while constructing these obstacles. Let's pause the game so I can show you which mistake we did. Expand our small circle holder prefab and select the small circle. We can see that the position of this game object is in the middle of the obstacle. However, if we select the small circle holder, it will be below the obstacle, and that's where we made a mistake. So to fix that, make sure you drag the small circle out of this. It will warn you about breaking the prefab, just click continue. And then we want to drag this small circle holder up, and the position should be 2 on the y-axis. However, now it also dragged up our 2D collider, so we'll need to fix that as well. Make sure you set the y offset to 0 in the Circle Collider 2D tab. Once that is done, it should be fine. Select the small circle again and drag it into the small circle holder to make it a child of it. And since this isn't a prefab anymore, we'll need to make it into one. But this one is the one with the wrong options. So make sure you select this prefab in the prefabs folder and delete it by pressing delete on your keyboard. It will warn you, but don't worry, just click delete. And then we can drag it into the prefabs folder to save it again. And this is the correct one. We will also need to do the same changes to the small rectangle holder, since we did the mistake there as well. To edit it, simply drag it into the scene, and the same process again. Expand it, drag the small rectangle out, break the prefab, and then we need to adjust these positions. I think it's going to be -1 on the y-axis for this. And we'll also need to adjust the y offset in the Circle Collider 2D tab. So 0 should be fine. Just make sure that this collider is parallel with the center of the obstacle. Once that is also fixed, take the small rectangle again and drag it into the small rectangle holder to make it a child of it. Then we need to do the same thing. Click on the small rectangle holder in the prefabs folder and press delete on your keyboard. Click on the delete button to get rid of this bad prefab. And now, since we are missing the small rectangle holder prefab, we simply create one by dragging this into the prefabs folder. And make sure you delete the small rectangle holder from the starting scene. Since we have edited these prefabs and they are in fact new prefabs that we created, we need to go back to the half screen, scroll down to our script, and we can see that the small circle prefab and the rectangle prefab are missing. So select the small circle holder and drag it into the circle prefab, and the rectangle holder, drag it into the rectangle prefab. Okay, now everything should be working fine. Let's see. The only issue now is that since we edited this, the obstacles are spawning too close to each other. So we will select both the small rectangle spawn and the small circle spawn by holding Ctrl and selecting them, and drag it up a little bit. You can play with adjusting the position of these spawn points and finding the right position to spawn your obstacles in your game, but we'll not spend too much time doing that now, because it doesn't have to be perfect right now. The main thing that matters now is that we got the point game objects to spawn in the middle of the obstacles, and that's what we wanted to do. In the next lesson we will be making a score text in the top left corner that will display how many stars we collected. And we will be editing the player collision script to make that number increment every time we collect a point.